Question 1. The control framework reveals that the Agua Prieta Technological Institute entrance examination is designed to assess a candidate's foundational knowledge and aptitude. If an applicant believes they have identified a question that may be flawed or inaccurately phrased, what is the most appropriate course of action to uphold the integrity of the examination process? Option A. Discuss the specific question with other candidates during a break to gauge their understanding and confirm the perceived issue. Option B. Ignore the perceived flaw and complete the examination as best as possible, assuming it is an intentional challenge. Option C. Immediately report the perceived flaw to the examination proctor during the exam, requesting clarification or a potential correction. Option D. Make a note of the question and contact the institute's admissions office after the examination has concluded to formally report the concern. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the perceived flaw to the examination proctor during the exam, requesting clarification or a potential correction. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the foundational principles governing the admission process at the Agua Prieta Technological Institute, specifically as they relate to the integrity and fairness of the entrance examination. The applicant must navigate the ethical imperative to uphold the examination's validity, while also considering the potential impact of their actions on the institution's reputation and the fairness to other candidates. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate inquiry and actions that could compromise the examination process. The correct approach involves a direct and transparent communication with the designated examination authority, adhering strictly to the established protocols for addressing concerns about the examination's content. This approach is justified by the regulatory framework of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute, which implicitly mandates that all admission processes, including the entrance examination, must be conducted with fairness, transparency, and adherence to established guidelines. By reporting concerns through the official channels, the applicant upholds the integrity of the examination and allows the relevant authorities to investigate and rectify any potential issues, thereby ensuring a fair outcome for all. This aligns with the ethical obligation to act with honesty and to contribute to maintaining the credibility of academic institutions. An incorrect approach that involves attempting to independently verify the examination's content by seeking external assistance or sharing information about specific questions before the examination is completed would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action directly undermines the principle of a standardized and secure examination, potentially providing an unfair advantage to some candidates and disadvantaging others. It violates the implicit trust placed in applicants to maintain the confidentiality and integrity of the examination process. Furthermore, such actions could be construed as an attempt to compromise the examination's validity, leading to disciplinary action and potentially invalidating the applicant's candidacy. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the perceived irregularities and proceeding with the examination without raising any concerns, is also professionally problematic. While it avoids direct violation, it fails to uphold the ethical responsibility to contribute to the fairness and integrity of the process. By not reporting potential issues, the applicant allows for the possibility of systemic unfairness to persist, which is contrary to the spirit of academic integrity that educational institutions strive to maintain. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the institution's established procedures for handling examination-related concerns. Applicants should be encouraged to identify the appropriate authority or department responsible for overseeing admissions and examinations. The next step is to articulate the concerns clearly and factually, providing any relevant details without speculating or making accusations. The focus should always be on seeking clarification or reporting potential issues through official channels, thereby respecting the established governance and ensuring that any necessary actions are taken by those with the authority to do so. Question 2. The evaluation methodology shows a preference for assessing candidates through a series of practical, hands-on projects that directly simulate tasks encountered in advanced engineering courses. This approach is contrasted with a methodology that utilizes a broad spectrum of question types, including theoretical problems, conceptual analysis, and problem-solving scenarios across foundational science and mathematics disciplines. Considering the purpose of an entrance exam for a technological institute, which evaluation methodology is most aligned with the principles of comprehensive and equitable candidate selection. Option A, a methodology that relies on interviews with former students to gauge an applicant's potential fit with the institute's culture. Option B, the methodology that utilizes a broad spectrum of question types, including theoretical problems, conceptual analysis, and problem-solving scenarios across foundational science and mathematics disciplines. Option C, the methodology that focuses solely on assessing candidates through a series of practical, hands-on projects that directly simulate tasks encountered in advanced engineering courses. Option D, a methodology that prioritizes the applicant's high school GPA without any standardized testing component. The correct answer is B, the methodology that utilizes a broad spectrum of question types, including theoretical problems, conceptual analysis, and problem-solving scenarios across foundational science and mathematics disciplines. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the core principles and objectives of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's entrance examination process, specifically in relation to how different evaluation methodologies are assessed. The challenge lies in identifying the methodology that best aligns with the stated purpose of such an exam, which is typically to gauge a broad range of aptitudes and knowledge relevant to higher education and technology, rather than a narrow, specialized skill. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between a comprehensive and a potentially biased or incomplete assessment. The correct approach involves recognizing that a robust entrance examination for a technological institute should aim for a holistic evaluation. This means assessing not only foundational academic knowledge, but also critical thinking, problem-solving abilities, and potentially an understanding of scientific principles. A methodology that incorporates diverse question types and covers multiple subject areas, as implied by a comprehensive comparative analysis, is most likely to provide a fair and accurate measure of an applicant's readiness for the institute's programs. This aligns with the ethical principle of fairness in assessment and the regulatory guideline of ensuring that entrance exams are designed to select candidates who possess the necessary competencies for academic success. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on a single, highly specialized technical skill would be professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the broader objectives of an entrance exam, which is to identify potential across various disciplines within technology. It could lead to the exclusion of capable students who may excel in other areas but lack deep expertise in one niche. Ethically, this approach is discriminatory, as it favors a specific subset of knowledge, potentially disadvantaging applicants with diverse but equally valuable skill sets. Another incorrect approach that relies on subjective interpretation of responses without clear, predefined criteria would also be professionally unsound. This introduces bias and inconsistency into the evaluation process, undermining the validity and reliability of the exam. Regulatory guidelines for standardized testing emphasize objectivity and transparency, which are absent in a purely subjective assessment. This can lead to unfair outcomes and damage the reputation of the institution. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes memorization of facts over the application of knowledge would be a failure. While factual recall is important, a technological institute seeks individuals who can analyze, synthesize, and apply information. An exam focused solely on memorization does not adequately assess these higher-order cognitive skills, which are crucial for success in technical fields. This approach is ethically questionable, as it does not truly measure an applicant's potential to contribute to and succeed in a demanding academic environment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves first understanding the explicit and implicit goals of the assessment. This requires consulting the official guidelines and objectives of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's entrance exam. Then, one must critically evaluate each proposed methodology against these objectives, considering principles of fairness, validity, reliability, and ethical practice. The chosen methodology should be one that demonstrably supports the institution's mission to select well-rounded, capable individuals prepared for technological studies. Question 3. The performance metrics show that the applicant's previous academic results in mathematics and physics are slightly below the stated minimum average required for admission to the engineering programs at the Agua Prieta Technological Institute, although their scores in other science subjects and their participation in relevant extracurricular activities are strong. Which approach best aligns with the admission guidelines of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute? Option A. Focus solely on the strong performance in other science subjects and extracurricular activities, omitting any mention of the lower scores in mathematics and physics to present a more favorable overall picture. Option B. Emphasize the strong performance in other science subjects and extracurricular activities, while acknowledging the slightly lower scores in mathematics and physics and explaining how these were overcome or how the applicant has developed relevant skills through other means. Option C. Highlight the applicant's perceived potential and enthusiasm for engineering, suggesting that these qualities are more important than specific past academic performance metrics. Option D. Assume that strong performance in other areas will compensate for the lower scores in mathematics and physics, and therefore, no specific explanation or acknowledgement is needed regarding those subjects. The correct answer is B. Emphasize the strong performance in other science subjects and extracurricular activities, while acknowledging the slightly lower scores in mathematics and physics and explaining how these were overcome or how the applicant has developed relevant skills through other means. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the institutional admission criteria and how to interpret them in the context of their academic profile. The challenge lies in accurately assessing whether their qualifications align with the stated requirements, avoiding overconfidence or underestimation, and presenting their case persuasively and truthfully. Careful judgment is required to balance self-advocacy with adherence to the established admission process. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's official admission regulations and guidelines. This means identifying the specific academic prerequisites, required documentation, and any stated performance benchmarks for entrance. An applicant should then objectively compare their own academic record and achievements against these explicit criteria. If there are areas where their profile might be perceived as weaker, they should focus on highlighting strengths in other areas or providing context that demonstrates their potential to succeed, all while remaining truthful and transparent about their qualifications. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the established institutional framework for admissions, demonstrating respect for the process and a realistic self-assessment, which are foundational ethical principles in academic applications. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a general understanding of university admissions is sufficient without consulting the specific regulations of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute. This fails to acknowledge the unique requirements and standards set by the institution, potentially leading to an application that does not meet the necessary criteria. Another incorrect approach is to exaggerate or misrepresent academic achievements or qualifications. This is a direct ethical failure, violating principles of honesty and integrity, and could lead to disqualification or future academic repercussions. Furthermore, focusing solely on perceived potential without demonstrating a clear alignment with the stated admission metrics, as outlined by the Institute, would be an ineffective strategy, as it bypasses the established evaluation framework. Professionals in academic admissions or applicants seeking entry should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established rules and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the specific requirements of the institution. 2. Conducting an honest self-assessment against these requirements. 3. Presenting information accurately and transparently. 4. Seeking clarification from the institution if any aspect of the requirements is unclear. 5. Focusing on demonstrating how one meets the stated criteria rather than attempting to circumvent or ignore them. Question 4. Quality control measures reveal a credible report alleging that a candidate for admission to the Agua Prieta Technological Institute may have received unauthorized assistance during the entrance examination. The report is specific but lacks definitive proof. According to the regulatory framework and guidelines of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Conduct a brief, informal inquiry with the invigilator and make a decision based on their immediate recollection. Option B. Immediately disqualify the candidate from the entrance examination based on the seriousness of the allegation. Option C. Disregard the report as it lacks definitive proof and proceed with the candidate's application as normal. Option D. Initiate a formal, impartial investigation into the alleged incident. Following the Institute's established protocols for handling examination irregularities, and inform the candidate of the investigation. The correct answer is D. Initiate a formal, impartial investigation into the alleged incident, following the institute's established protocols for handling examination irregularities, and inform the candidate of the investigation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to academic integrity and the fair evaluation of applicants to the Agua Prieta Technological Institute. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to uphold the integrity of the entrance examination process with the ethical obligation to ensure all candidates are assessed fairly and without prejudice, while also adhering to the specific regulations governing the Institute's admissions. The Institute's regulatory framework, which is the sole governing authority for this exam, likely emphasizes principles of equal opportunity and the prevention of academic misconduct. The correct approach involves a thorough, impartial investigation into the alleged irregularities, strictly following the established procedures outlined by the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's examination guidelines. This approach is correct because it prioritizes adherence to the Institute's specific regulatory framework, which mandates fair assessment and the investigation of any potential breaches of examination rules. By initiating a formal review process, the Institute demonstrates its commitment to maintaining the credibility of its entrance exams and ensuring that all applicants are evaluated on their merits, in accordance with its own established policies. This upholds the principle of academic integrity and equal opportunity as defined by the Institute. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disqualify the candidate based on an unsubstantiated rumor. This fails to adhere to the Institute's likely procedural requirements for handling allegations of misconduct, which would necessitate an investigation before any punitive action is taken. It also violates the principle of presumed innocence and fair process, which are implicit in any regulated examination system. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the report entirely. This would be a failure to uphold the Institute's responsibility to ensure the integrity of its examination process. By disregarding credible information about potential irregularities, the Institute risks compromising the fairness of its admissions and potentially allowing unqualified candidates to gain admission, thereby undermining its academic standards and reputation. This also neglects the Institute's duty to investigate and address any issues that could affect the validity of the exam results. A further incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial or biased investigation. This would also violate the Institute's regulatory framework by failing to conduct a thorough and impartial review. Such an approach could lead to an incorrect outcome, either unfairly penalizing a candidate or failing to identify genuine misconduct, both of which would damage the Institute's credibility and the fairness of its admissions process. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve, first, acknowledging the report and its potential implications. Second, consulting the specific regulatory framework and internal policies of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute regarding examination integrity and applicant evaluation. Third, initiating a formal, impartial investigation process as prescribed by these regulations. Fourth, gathering evidence and providing the candidate an opportunity to respond. And finally, making a decision based on the findings and in strict accordance with the Institute's established rules and guidelines. Question 5. Governance review demonstrates that a member of the admissions committee has a close personal acquaintance with a candidate applying for admission to the Agua Prieta Technological Institute. This acquaintance has performed adequately on the entrance examination, but is not among the top-scoring candidates. The committee member wishes to ensure this acquaintance is admitted. Considering the Institute's commitment to merit-based admissions and the integrity of its entrance examination process, what is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee member? Option A. Advocate for the candidate's admission based on their adequate examination score and the personal acquaintance, while ensuring all established admission criteria are met and transparently documented. Option B. Suggest to the candidate that they reapply for the next academic year, implying that their current application might be disadvantaged due to the committee member's position. Option C. Abstain from any involvement in the evaluation or decision-making process for this specific candidate and report the personal acquaintance to the committee chair to ensure impartiality. Option D. Directly petition the admissions committee to admit the candidate, highlighting the personal acquaintance and suggesting a review of their application outside the standard scoring rubric. The correct answer is A. Advocate for the candidate's admission based on their adequate examination score and the personal acquaintance, while ensuring all established admission criteria are met and transparently documented. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain academic integrity and ensure fair admission processes, as mandated by the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's internal regulations and general principles of educational governance. The challenge lies in balancing the desire to support a candidate with a personal connection against the imperative to uphold the meritocratic and unbiased nature of the entrance examination. Careful judgment is required to avoid any perception or reality of favoritism, which could undermine the credibility of the institute. The correct approach involves a transparent and impartial review of the candidate's application and examination performance against the established admission criteria. This aligns with the institute's commitment to fair evaluation and the principle that all applicants should be assessed on equal footing. Adhering strictly to the published admission guidelines and the integrity of the examination process is paramount. This ensures that decisions are based on objective merit, thereby safeguarding the institute's reputation and the fairness of its admissions. An incorrect approach that involves directly intervening to influence the admission decision based on the personal relationship, without regard for the candidate's actual performance or the established criteria, represents a significant ethical failure. This would violate the principle of impartiality and could be construed as a breach of trust in the admission process. Such an action would undermine the meritocratic system and potentially lead to the admission of less qualified candidates, thereby compromising the academic standards of the institute. Another incorrect approach, which might involve creating a special or expedited review process solely for this candidate, also fails to uphold the principles of fairness and equal treatment. While seemingly an attempt to address the situation, it deviates from the established procedures and creates an unfair advantage, thereby violating the spirit and letter of the institute's admission regulations. This can lead to resentment among other applicants and damage the institute's reputation for equitable admissions. A professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the institute's admission policies and ethical codes. It requires a commitment to transparency, impartiality, and the rule of law. In this context, the institute's regulations. When faced with a situation involving personal connections, a professional should 1. Identify the potential conflict of interest or ethical concern. 2. Consult the relevant institutional policies and guidelines. 3. Ensure all actions are documented and justifiable based on objective criteria. 4. If necessary, recuse oneself from any decision-making process where a conflict exists and seek guidance from a supervisor or ethics committee. The ultimate goal is to uphold the integrity of the institution and its processes. Question 6. Operational review demonstrates a proctor observing a student during an entrance examination at the Agua Prieta Technological Institute exhibiting behavior that strongly suggests the use of unauthorized external assistance. The proctor is concerned about the integrity of the examination process and the fairness to other candidates. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the proctor? Strictly adhering to the internal regulations and guidelines of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute concerning academic integrity and examination procedures. Option A. Discreetly inform the student's peers about the suspected misconduct to gauge their reactions and gather informal corroboration before deciding on a course of action. Option B. Discreetly document the observed behavior, note the time, and continue to monitor the student without direct intervention until the examination concludes, at which point the proctor will report the incident with detailed observations to the Examination Oversight Committee for formal review according to institute policy. Option C. Approach the student privately and verbally warn them about their behavior, advising them to cease immediately, and then allow them to continue the examination without further documentation or reporting. Option D. Immediately confront the student, confiscate their examination materials, and escort them from the examination hall, informing them they are disqualified based on the proctor's suspicion. The correct answer is B. Discreetly document the observed behavior, note the time, and continue to monitor the student without direct intervention until the examination concludes, at which point the proctor will report the incident with detailed observations to the Examination Oversight Committee for formal review according to institute policy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need to address a potential academic integrity issue and the requirement to follow established institutional procedures. The pressure to act swiftly must be balanced against the imperative to ensure fairness and due process for the student. Careful judgment is required to avoid premature accusations or actions that could undermine the integrity of the examination process or unfairly penalize a student. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of investigation, adhering strictly to the internal regulations of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute concerning academic misconduct. This approach is right because it upholds the principles of natural justice and due process, ensuring that any allegations are thoroughly investigated before any disciplinary action is taken. Specifically, it aligns with the Institute's commitment to academic integrity by providing a clear framework for addressing potential violations, thereby protecting the credibility of its examinations and qualifications. This methodical process minimizes the risk of error and ensures that decisions are based on evidence and established policy. An incorrect approach that involves immediate confiscation of the exam and informal questioning, without initiating the formal disciplinary procedure, fails to adhere to the Institute's established protocols. This bypasses the necessary steps for evidence gathering and student representation, potentially leading to an unfair outcome and violating the student's right to a fair hearing as outlined in the Institute's academic regulations. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the suspicious activity to avoid potential conflict or administrative burden, represents a failure to uphold the Institute's commitment to academic integrity. This inaction allows potential misconduct to go unaddressed, undermining the value of the examinations and creating an environment where academic dishonesty might be perceived as acceptable. It directly contravenes the spirit and letter of regulations designed to maintain academic standards. A further incorrect approach, which is to immediately assume guilt and impose a penalty without investigation, is a severe breach of procedural fairness and institutional policy. This prejudges the situation and denies the student the opportunity to present their perspective or evidence, violating fundamental principles of justice and the specific disciplinary procedures mandated by the Agua Prieta Technological Institute. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established procedures. This involves 1. Recognizing the potential issue and its implications for academic integrity. 2. Consulting and strictly following the relevant internal regulations and guidelines of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute regarding academic misconduct. 3. Documenting all observations and actions meticulously. 4. Initiating the formal investigation process as prescribed by the Institute, ensuring the student is informed and afforded their rights. 5. Basing any subsequent decisions solely on the findings of the investigation and the Institute's policies. Question 7. The control framework reveals that an applicant for the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's entrance exam, Juan, has submitted an application with several required supporting documents missing. According to the Institute's admissions guidelines, all documentation must be complete for an application to be considered valid. However, the guidelines also stipulate a process for handling incomplete applications. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the admissions office? Option A. Accept Juan's application as is, assuming the missing documents are not critical for initial review. Option B. Contact Juan to inform him of the missing documents and provide a clear deadline for their submission, as per the Institute's established procedure for incomplete applications. Option C. Forward Juan's application to the admissions committee for a discretionary review to decide on its validity. Option D. Immediately reject Juan's application due to the incomplete submission, as per the strict requirement for all documentation. The correct answer is B. Contact Juan to inform him of the missing documents and provide a clear deadline for their submission, as per the Institute's established procedure for incomplete applications. Explanation. The control framework reveals a scenario where a student applicant, Juan, has provided incomplete documentation for his entrance exam application to the Agua Prieta Technological Institute. Challenge lies in balancing the Institute's commitment to a fair and transparent admissions process with the need to provide reasonable accommodation and support to applicants, especially in the context of an entrance examination. The Institute must adhere to its own internal regulations and any applicable educational guidelines that govern admissions procedures. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of requesting the missing information from Juan, clearly outlining what is required and providing a reasonable deadline for submission. This aligns with principles of due process and fairness, ensuring that all applicants have an equal opportunity to complete their applications. It also reflects good administrative practice, maintaining accurate records and avoiding arbitrary decisions. The regulatory framework for university admissions typically emphasizes clear communication, defined procedures for handling incomplete applications, and adherence to established timelines. An incorrect approach would be to immediately reject Juan's application without attempting to contact him or provide an opportunity to rectify the omissions. This fails to uphold principles of fairness and may violate internal policies that allow for a grace period or a request for additional information. Another incorrect approach would be to accept the application as is, despite the missing documentation. This compromises the integrity of the admissions process, potentially leading to an unfair advantage for Juan over other applicants who have submitted complete documentation, and could also violate the institute's own admission criteria. A third incorrect approach would be to make an arbitrary decision based on personal judgment rather than established procedures, which undermines the systematic and objective nature of admissions. Professionals in admissions should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and procedures, clear and documented communication with applicants, and fairness to all parties involved. This involves understanding the specific regulations governing the admissions process, maintaining a clear audit trail of all communications and decisions, and seeking guidance from supervisors or relevant department when faced with ambiguous situations. Question 8. The monitoring system demonstrates a significant, unexplained fluctuation in the number of applicants from a specific geographic region for the upcoming entrance exam. This fluctuation is not correlated with any known demographic shifts or marketing campaign changes. Which of the following represents the most appropriate initial response for the admissions committee? Option A. Initiate a thorough technical audit of the monitoring system to identify potential data input errors, system glitches, or reporting anomalies before drawing any conclusions or taking action. Option B. Interpret the fluctuation as a direct indicator of reduced applicant quality and begin implementing stricter screening criteria for applicants from that region. Option C. Immediately adjust enrollment targets for that region downwards, assuming a genuine decline in interest, and reallocate resources to other recruitment areas. Option D. Publicly announce a potential issue with the monitoring system and request external consultants to review its functionality. The correct answer is A. Initiate a thorough technical audit of the monitoring system to identify potential data input errors, system glitches, or reporting anomalies before drawing any conclusions or taking action. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential for misinterpreting data from the monitoring system, which could lead to incorrect academic advising or resource allocation decisions. The Agua Prieta Technological Institute's entrance exam regulations, while not explicitly detailed here, would implicitly require adherence to principles of fairness, accuracy, and responsible data handling in any system used for student assessment or monitoring. The challenge lies in distinguishing between genuine academic trends and anomalies that might be caused by system errors or external factors, necessitating a rigorous and evidence-based approach to interpretation. The correct approach involves a systematic validation of the monitoring system's data against established academic benchmarks and, where possible, cross-referencing with other independent data sources. This aligns with the implicit regulatory expectation of accuracy and reliability in any system impacting student admissions or academic progression. Ethically, it ensures that decisions are based on sound information, preventing potential harm to students or the institution. This approach prioritizes due diligence and a commitment to factual integrity, which are foundational to any educational institution's operational standards. An approach that relies solely on the raw output of the monitoring system without independent verification is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to decisions based on flawed data, violating the principle of accuracy. Furthermore, if the system is found to be unreliable and decisions are made based on its output, it could constitute a breach of institutional policy regarding data integrity and potentially lead to challenges regarding the fairness of admissions or academic evaluations. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the data entirely without investigation. This neglects the potential for valuable insights and fails to uphold the responsibility to understand and manage the institution's operational systems. It represents a failure to engage with available information and a lack of proactive problem solving. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the purpose and limitations of any monitoring system. This involves seeking clarification on data collection methodologies, potential biases, and validation procedures. When anomalies are detected, the next step is to investigate thoroughly, gathering corroborating evidence and consulting with relevant stakeholders or technical experts. Decisions should then be made based on a comprehensive understanding of the data, considering its reliability and implications, and always in alignment with institutional policies and ethical guidelines. Question 9. The audit findings indicate potential irregularities in the admission process for the upcoming academic year at the Agua Prieta Technological Institute, specifically concerning the review of applicant documentation and the adherence to established selection criteria. As a responsible member of the Institute's administrative staff, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Immediately implement stricter, ad hoc admission requirements for all remaining applicants to compensate for the potential issues identified. Option B. Disregard the audit findings, assuming they are minor procedural oversights that will not significantly impact the integrity of the admission process. Option C. Initiate a formal review of the audit findings by consulting the Institute's admission policies and procedures, and if necessary, commence an impartial investigation to ascertain the facts and determine appropriate corrective measures. Option D. Report the audit findings to external regulatory bodies, without first conducting an internal assessment to understand the scope and nature of the alleged irregularities. The correct answer is C. Initiate a formal review of the audit findings by consulting the Institute's admission policies and procedures, and if necessary, commence an impartial investigation to ascertain the facts and determine appropriate corrective measures. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate potential conflicts of interest and uphold the integrity of the admission process at the Agua Prieta Technological Institute. The audit findings suggest a deviation from established procedures, necessitating a careful and ethical response to ensure fairness and compliance with institutional guidelines. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need to address the findings with the potential implications for individuals involved and the reputation of the Institute. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial investigation into the audit findings, adhering strictly to the internal regulations and admission policies of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute. This approach prioritizes transparency, fairness, and accountability. By initiating a formal review process, the individual demonstrates a commitment to upholding the established rules and ensuring that all admission decisions are made based on merit and in accordance with the Institute's criteria. This aligns with the ethical obligation to maintain the integrity of academic institutions and their admission processes, as implicitly governed by the Institute's own operational guidelines and any overarching educational regulations applicable in Mexico. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings without proper investigation. This failure to act would violate the implicit duty to ensure the proper functioning of the Institute's administrative processes and could lead to the perpetuation of irregularities. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately implement punitive measures without a thorough understanding of the facts. This premature action could unfairly penalize individuals and undermine the principle of due process, which is a fundamental aspect of fair institutional governance. Furthermore, attempting to conceal or downplay the findings would represent a severe ethical breach, compromising the individual's integrity and the Institute's commitment to transparency. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic approach. First, understanding the nature and scope of the audit findings. Second, consulting the relevant internal policies and procedures of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute. Third, gathering all necessary information through a fair and impartial investigation. And finally, taking appropriate action based on the evidence and in accordance with institutional regulations. This structured process ensures that decisions are informed, ethical, and defensible. Question 10. The control framework reveals that an applicant for the Agua Prieta Technological Institute entrance exam, Juan, has submitted an application with a crucial document missing. Which of the following actions best upholds the institute's commitment to fair and transparent admissions while ensuring the integrity of the examination process? Option A. Allow Juan to take the entrance exam, but inform him that his results will be held until the missing document is eventually submitted. Option B. Immediately reject Juan's application due to the incomplete documentation, without any further communication. Option C. Inform Juan of the missing document, provide a specific deadline for its submission, and clearly outline the procedure for submission, while noting that failure to comply will result in application rejection. Option D. Accept Juan's application with the understanding that the missing document will be provided at a later, unspecified time, potentially after the exam. The correct answer is C. Inform Juan of the missing document, provide a specific deadline for its submission, and clearly outline the procedure for submission, while noting that failure to comply will result in application rejection. Explanation. The control framework reveals a scenario where a student applicant, Juan, has provided incomplete documentation for his entrance exam application to the Agua Prieta Technological Institute. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the institute's commitment to fair and transparent admissions with the need to process applications efficiently and uphold the integrity of the entrance examination process. The institute must ensure that all applicants meet the established criteria while also providing a reasonable opportunity for applicants to rectify any deficiencies. Careful judgment is required to determine the appropriate course of action without compromising the fairness of the process for other applicants or setting a precedent that could undermine future admissions. The correct approach involves proactively communicating with Juan to inform him of the missing documentation and providing a clear, reasonable deadline for its submission, along with instructions on how to do so. This approach aligns with the principles of due process and fairness inherent in educational admissions. It respects the applicant's right to be informed of deficiencies and to have an opportunity to correct them. Furthermore, it adheres to the likely internal guidelines of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute, which would prioritize a thorough and equitable evaluation of all candidates. This proactive communication ensures that the institute acts with integrity and provides a supportive, yet firm, process for applicants. An incorrect approach would be to immediately reject Juan's application without any prior notification or opportunity to submit the missing documents. This fails to uphold the principle of fairness and could be seen as an arbitrary rejection, potentially leading to appeals or reputational damage for the institute. Another incorrect approach would be to accept the application with incomplete documentation, as this would violate the established admission requirements and compromise the integrity of the entrance examination process. It would be unfair to other applicants who have meticulously followed all instructions and submitted complete applications. A third incorrect approach would be to allow Juan to take the exam, but then withhold his results until the documentation is provided, as this creates an ambiguous status and could lead to administrative complications and potential disputes regarding the validity of his participation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve consulting the official admission guidelines and regulations of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute. If specific procedures for handling incomplete applications are not explicitly detailed, the responsible admissions officer should seek guidance from their supervisor or the relevant administrative department. The core principle should always be to act with fairness, transparency, and adherence to established institutional policies, ensuring that all applicants are treated equitably and that the integrity of the admissions process is maintained. Question 11. The assessment process reveals that a candidate's submitted high school transcript shows a grade in a core subject that is significantly higher than their reported grade on the standardized entrance exam for the same subject. This discrepancy is noted during the initial review of application materials. Option A. Immediately disqualify the candidate from the entrance exam due to the apparent inconsistency in their academic records. Option B. Forward the discrepancy to the admissions committee for an immediate decision on disqualification without any prior communication with the candidate. Option C. Proceed with the candidate's admission without further investigation, assuming the transcript grade is accurate and the exam score is an anomaly. Option D. Politely contact the candidate to request clarification regarding the discrepancy between their transcript grade and their entrance exam score, providing them an opportunity to explain. The correct answer is D. Politely contact the candidate to request clarification regarding the discrepancy between their transcript grade and their entrance exam score, providing them an opportunity to explain. Explanation. The assessment process for the Agua Prieta Technological Institute entrance exam presents a scenario where a candidate's submitted documentation appears to contain inconsistencies. This is professionally challenging because it directly impacts the integrity of the admissions process and requires a fair, yet thorough, evaluation. The institute must uphold its standards while ensuring no candidate is unfairly disadvantaged. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between minor clerical errors and deliberate misrepresentation. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the submitted documents, cross-referencing information where possible, and initiating a polite, fact-finding inquiry with the candidate. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with the principles of fairness and due process. It respects the candidate's right to be heard and allows for clarification of any discrepancies before a final decision is made. This aligns with the implicit guidelines of any educational institution aiming for transparent and equitable admissions. An incorrect approach that involves immediate rejection based on the initial perceived discrepancy fails to uphold the principle of fairness, assumes guilt without investigation, and denies the candidate an opportunity to explain. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the discrepancy and proceed with admission, compromises the integrity of the admissions process and could lead to admitting unqualified candidates, undermining the institute's academic standards. A third incorrect approach, which is to contact the candidate in an accusatory manner, is unprofessional and can create unnecessary conflict, potentially damaging the institute's reputation. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a commitment to transparency, fairness, and thoroughness. It involves establishing clear procedures for handling documentation issues, prioritizing factual investigation over assumption, and maintaining professional communication throughout the process. The goal is to reach an informed decision that is both just to the candidate and protective of the institution's standards. Question 12. Compliance review shows a faculty member has observed what appears to be a pattern of plagiarism in a student's submitted work across multiple assignments. The faculty member is concerned about academic integrity, but is unsure of the immediate next steps to take before a formal investigation can be initiated by the appropriate academic committee. Option A. Gather all relevant submitted work and any supporting evidence of plagiarism. Document the findings meticulously and submit a formal report to the Academic Integrity Committee for their review and subsequent action. Option B. Confront the student directly with the evidence and demand an immediate confession to avoid further institutional procedures. Option C. Discuss the observations with colleagues to gauge their opinions on the severity of the issue before deciding on a course of action. Option D. Immediately inform the student of the suspected plagiarism and request a written explanation before any formal investigation begins. The correct answer is D. Immediately inform the student of the suspected plagiarism and request a written explanation before any formal investigation begins. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need to address a potential academic integrity issue and the requirement to follow established institutional procedures. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of the situation with the due process rights of the student, ensuring fairness and adherence to the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's academic regulations. Careful judgment is required to avoid premature accusations or actions that could undermine the integrity of the investigation process. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of gathering evidence and presenting it to the appropriate academic committee for review. This method upholds the principles of due process and fairness by ensuring that the student has an opportunity to respond to the allegations after a thorough and impartial investigation. It aligns with the likely regulatory framework of an educational institution, which typically mandates clear procedures for handling academic misconduct to maintain academic standards and protect the rights of all individuals involved. This approach prioritizes adherence to established guidelines, ensuring that any disciplinary action is based on substantiated evidence and follows a predetermined, fair process. An incorrect approach that involves immediate disciplinary action without a formal review process fails to respect the student's right to a fair hearing. This bypasses the established procedures and could lead to an unjust outcome, potentially damaging the student's academic record and the institution's reputation. Represents a failure to comply with the likely internal regulations governing academic integrity and a disregard for ethical principles of fairness and due process. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the potential infraction due to a lack of immediate, irrefutable proof, is also professionally unacceptable. While caution is necessary, a complete disregard for a credible concern about academic dishonesty can undermine the institution's commitment to academic integrity. It fails to uphold the responsibility of educators and administrators to investigate potential breaches of academic standards, potentially allowing for a recurrence of such issues. This approach neglects the proactive duty to maintain a fair and honest academic environment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, acknowledge and document the concern. Second, consult the relevant institutional policies and procedures for academic misconduct. Third, gather preliminary, objective evidence without confronting the student directly at this stage. Fourth, report the findings and evidence to the designated Academic Integrity Committee or authority. Finally, allow the committee to conduct a formal investigation and determine the appropriate course of action, ensuring the student is informed and has an opportunity to present their case. This systematic process ensures fairness, compliance, and the maintenance of academic standards. Question 13. Upon reviewing an applicant's submission for the Agua Prieta Technological Institute entrance exam, an admissions officer notes that the applicant expresses significant personal hardship and a strong desire to enroll immediately, even though their application materials do not fully meet all stated academic prerequisites. The officer is aware of the institute's commitment to supporting promising students, but also the strict adherence required for the entrance examination's admission criteria. What is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions officer? Option A. Recommend the applicant for admission based on their expressed motivation and potential, overriding minor discrepancies in their academic prerequisites to offer immediate enrollment. Option B. Grant the applicant provisional admission contingent upon their immediate improvement in the areas where they fell short, with a clear timeline and support plan provided by the institute. Option C. Inform the applicant that their application cannot be considered due to not meeting the stated prerequisites and offer no further guidance or alternatives. Option D. Advise the applicant to reapply in the next admission cycle after they have had the opportunity to address the academic prerequisites, while also informing them of any available preparatory programs or resources the institute might offer. The correct answer is A. Recommend the applicant for admission based on their expressed motivation and potential, overriding minor discrepancies in their academic prerequisites to offer immediate enrollment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's perceived need for immediate access to academic resources and the established procedures for admission to the Agua Prieta Technological Institute. Navigating this requires a careful balance of empathy and adherence to institutional policy, ensuring fairness and integrity in the admissions process. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial review of the student's application against the established admission criteria for the Agua Prieta Technological Institute. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the principles of fairness, transparency, and adherence to institutional regulations, which are paramount in any university entrance examination process. By following the prescribed admission guidelines, the admissions committee upholds the integrity of the selection process, ensuring that all candidates are evaluated on the same objective standards. This prevents any perception of favoritism or bias, which could undermine the credibility of the institute. An incorrect approach that prioritizes the student's emotional plea over established procedures fails to uphold the regulatory framework of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute. This would be ethically unsound, as it bypasses the objective criteria designed to ensure a merit-based selection. Another incorrect approach, which involves making an exception without proper justification or consultation, risks setting a precedent that could lead to future inconsistencies and challenges to the admissions process. This demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and a disregard for the established governance of the institute. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the applicant's qualifications against the defined admission requirements. If there are extenuating circumstances presented, these should be considered within the framework of existing institutional policies for appeals or special considerations, rather than as grounds for immediate deviation. Transparency in communication with the applicant regarding the process and outcomes is also crucial. Question 14. Cost-benefit analysis shows that the Advanced Robotics program at the Agua Prieta Technological Institute has a higher expenditure-to-enrollment ratio compared to other engineering disciplines. Considering the institute's commitment to fostering innovation and providing specialized technical education, which of the following approaches best balances financial prudence with academic integrity and student welfare? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive review of the Advanced Robotics program involving faculty, current students, and relevant industry experts to assess its long-term viability, potential for curriculum enhancement, and alternative funding models, while ensuring continued support for enrolled students. Option B. Immediately propose the discontinuation of the Advanced Robotics program to reallocate resources to more cost-effective disciplines. Citing the initial cost-benefit findings, Option C. Implement significant budget cuts to the Advanced Robotics program, reducing faculty and resources, to align its expenditure with the current enrollment numbers, without further consultation. Option D. Seek to drastically increase tuition fees specifically for students enrolling in the Advanced Robotics program to cover its higher operational costs, without exploring other avenues for efficiency or revenue generation. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive review of the Advanced Robotics program involving faculty, current students, and relevant industry experts to assess its long-term viability, potential for curriculum enhancement, and alternative funding models, while ensuring continued support for enrolled students. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in educational institutions, balancing resource allocation with the need to maintain academic standards and student well-being. The Agua Prieta Technological Institute, like any educational body, operates under specific internal regulations and potentially broader national educational guidelines. The challenge lies in identifying the most ethically and procedurally sound method for addressing a situation where a program's perceived benefits might be outweighed by its costs, without compromising the institute's mission or the rights of its students and faculty. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review that prioritizes data-driven decision-making, stakeholder consultation, and adherence to established academic and administrative policies. This ensures that any decision regarding program continuation or modification is well-informed, transparent, and defensible. It aligns with principles of good governance and academic integrity, which are paramount in any educational institution. The justification for this approach is rooted in the need for due process, fairness, and the long-term sustainability of the institute's academic offerings. Decisions impacting programs should not be made unilaterally or based on superficial cost-benefit assessments alone, but rather on a holistic evaluation that considers educational impact, student outcomes, faculty expertise, and alignment with the institute's strategic goals, all within the framework of its governing regulations. An incorrect approach would be to immediately propose program termination based solely on a preliminary cost-benefit analysis, without further investigation. This fails to acknowledge the potential qualitative benefits of the program, the impact on enrolled students, and the expertise of the faculty involved. It bypasses necessary consultation and due diligence, potentially violating internal policies that mandate review processes before significant academic changes are made. Another incorrect approach would be to suggest significant, unvetted cost-cutting measures that could degrade the quality of the program without a thorough assessment of their impact on learning outcomes. This prioritizes financial expediency over educational effectiveness and student experience. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on external market demand, without considering the institute's unique mission or its role in developing specific skill sets, would also be flawed. This overlooks the broader educational purpose and the potential for niche program success. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Clearly defining the problem and the scope of the analysis. 2. Gathering comprehensive data, including financial, academic, and student-related metrics. 3. Consulting with relevant stakeholders, faculty, students, administration, and potentially external advisors. 4. Evaluating options against established institutional policies and ethical guidelines. 5. Recommending a course of action that is transparent, justifiable, and aligned with the institute's mission and regulatory framework. Question 15. Process analysis reveals that a candidate preparing for the Agua Prieta Technological Institute entrance exam encounters a question that seems to draw upon general principles of educational assessment. But the exam's instructions explicitly state that all questions must be answered solely based on the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines specified for this particular exam. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the exam's jurisdictional requirements? Option A. Focusing exclusively on the specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines provided for the Agua Prieta Technological Institute entrance exam, even if it means not directly addressing a perceived broader context. Option B. Seeking external resources or consulting with educators familiar with broader educational assessment standards to interpret the question's intent. Option C. Applying general principles of educational assessment that are widely accepted in other institutions, assuming they are implicitly relevant. Option D. Inferring the question's meaning by comparing it to similar questions from entrance exams of other technological institutes in Mexico. Correct answer is C. Applying general principles of educational assessment that are widely accepted in other institutions, assuming they are implicitly relevant. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need for information to make a decision and the strict adherence to the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's entrance exam regulations. The pressure to perform well on the exam, coupled with the limited time and the specific nature of the exam's jurisdiction, necessitates a careful and principled approach. Misinterpreting or circumventing the exam's established framework could lead to disqualification or a compromised assessment of the candidate's abilities. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of the specified regulatory framework for the Agua Prieta Technological Institute entrance exam. This means focusing solely on the content and guidelines provided for this particular exam, without drawing upon external knowledge or assumptions. The regulatory justification lies in the exam's design to assess a candidate's preparedness within its defined scope. Adhering strictly to this scope ensures a fair and standardized evaluation, upholding the integrity of the entrance process. Ethically, it demonstrates respect for the institution's assessment procedures and a commitment to honest participation. An incorrect approach would be to introduce concepts or regulations from other technological institutes or general educational standards not explicitly mentioned in the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's entrance exam guidelines. This violates the principle of jurisdictional compliance, as it fails to adhere to the specific framework mandated for this exam. Such an approach risks misinterpreting the intent of the questions and providing answers that are irrelevant or incorrect within the exam's context. It also demonstrates a lack of discipline in following instructions, a trait that is often implicitly assessed in entrance examinations. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that common knowledge or universally accepted educational principles apply without verifying their relevance to the specific exam's jurisdiction. While some concepts might overlap, the exam's creators have established a precise set of parameters. Deviating from these parameters, even with seemingly sound general knowledge, can lead to an inaccurate assessment. This approach fails to recognize that the exam is a test of specific knowledge and adherence to specific rules, not a general knowledge quiz. A professional decision-making process in such a situation should prioritize a meticulous review of all provided exam materials, including any explicit statements about the scope of knowledge or regulatory frameworks to be considered. Candidates should actively seek clarification on any ambiguities within the exam's instructions. The guiding principle is to operate strictly within the defined boundaries of the assessment, ensuring that all responses are grounded in the specific context of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute entrance exam. Question 16. Examination of the data shows a candidate during the Agua Prieta Technological Institute entrance exam discreetly using a mobile device, potentially to access unauthorized study materials. As a proctor, what is the most appropriate immediate action according to the Institute's examination regulations? Option A. Discreetly observe the candidate to gather more evidence before reporting. Option B. Directly approach the candidate and confiscate the device. Option C. Ignore the activity to avoid disrupting other candidates. Option D. Immediately report the observed activity to the chief invigilator or examination supervisor. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the observed activity to the chief invigilator or examination supervisor. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's perceived need for immediate access to information and the institute's established procedures for academic integrity and data privacy. The pressure to perform well on an entrance exam, coupled with the availability of potentially unauthorized resources, creates a temptation to bypass ethical guidelines. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of the examination process and the institute's reputation. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's examination regulations. This means recognizing that any attempt to access or utilize unauthorized materials during the exam is a direct violation of academic policy. Professional responsibility is to report any observed irregularities or suspicious activity to the invigilator or examination supervisor, allowing them to address the situation according to established protocols. This upholds the principle of fairness and equal opportunity for all candidates, ensuring that the assessment accurately reflects individual knowledge and abilities, as mandated by the Institute's commitment to academic excellence and ethical conduct. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the observed activity. This failure to act condones potential academic dishonesty and undermines the fairness of the examination. It violates the implicit professional duty to maintain the integrity of the assessment process. Another incorrect approach would be to directly confront the student. While seemingly proactive, this bypasses the designated authority, the invigilator, and could escalate the situation unnecessarily, potentially leading to accusations of harassment or interference. It fails to follow the established procedural framework for handling exam irregularities, which is designed to ensure a fair and orderly resolution. A third incorrect approach would be to attempt to discreetly gather evidence of the student's actions without reporting it. This is problematic as it deviates from the prescribed reporting mechanism and could be construed as an attempt to conduct an unauthorized investigation, potentially compromising the integrity of any subsequent disciplinary process. It also delays the necessary intervention by the appropriate authorities. The professional decision-making process in such a situation should involve 1. Identifying the potential violation of examination rules. 2. Recalling and applying the specific regulations of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute regarding academic integrity and exam conduct. 3. Following the established protocol for reporting irregularities, which typically involves informing the invigilator or supervisor. 4. Trusting the designated authorities to handle the situation appropriately and impartially. Question 17. Assessment of which of the following approaches to evaluating prospective students for admission to the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's engineering programs would best align with the institution's stated commitment to fostering innovation and practical problem-solving skills? Option A. An assessment strategy that prioritizes the memorization of scientific formulas and historical technological advancements. Option B. An admissions process that heavily emphasizes subjective interviews with minimal standardized criteria for evaluation. Option C. A comparative analysis of assessment methodologies, evaluating their capacity to measure critical thinking, application of concepts, and analytical reasoning. Option D. An evaluation system that relies primarily on timed, multiple-choice examinations designed to assess rapid information retrieval. The correct answer is C. A comparative analysis of assessment methodologies, evaluating their capacity to measure critical thinking, application of concepts, and analytical reasoning. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the core principles and objectives of the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's entrance examination process, specifically in relation to how different assessment approaches align with the institution's goals. The challenge lies in discerning which method best reflects the Institute's commitment to evaluating a broad spectrum of applicant capabilities beyond rote memorization, thereby ensuring the selection of students who can thrive in its academic environment. Careful judgment is required to identify the approach that most accurately mirrors the Institute's pedagogical philosophy and admission criteria. The correct approach involves a comparative analysis of assessment methodologies, focusing on their ability to gauge critical thinking, problem-solving skills, and the capacity for applying knowledge in novel contexts, rather than simply testing recall. This aligns with the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's likely objective of admitting students who possess the intellectual agility and foundational understanding necessary for success in its technological programs. Such an approach is ethically sound as it promotes fairness and transparency by evaluating candidates on criteria relevant to academic performance and future contribution to the institute. It also reflects best professional practice in admissions, which emphasizes holistic evaluation. An approach that focuses solely on memorization and factual recall would be professionally unacceptable. This method fails to assess the deeper cognitive skills that are crucial for technological studies and would likely lead to the admission of students who may struggle with the analytical demands of the curriculum. This constitutes an ethical failure as it does not accurately measure an applicant's potential for success and could result in a misallocation of resources and opportunities. Another incorrect approach would be one that relies heavily on subjective, unstandardized interviews without clear criteria. While interviews can be valuable, an unstandardized format introduces bias and inconsistency, making it difficult to compare candidates fairly. This is an ethical failure because it undermines the principle of equal opportunity and can lead to discriminatory selection practices. A third incorrect approach would be one that prioritizes speed of completion over depth of understanding, perhaps through timed, multiple-choice tests that heavily favor quick guessing. This fails to assess the applicant's ability to engage with complex problems thoughtfully and could disadvantage students who require more time to articulate their reasoning. This is a professional and ethical failure as it does not provide a true measure of an applicant's capabilities and may exclude promising candidates. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the institution's mission and values, the specific learning outcomes expected of students, and the principles of sound assessment design. Professionals should prioritize assessment methods that are valid, measure what they intend to measure, reliable, produce consistent results, fair, treat all candidates equitably, and transparent candidates understand what is being assessed. A comparative analysis of potential assessment strategies, evaluating each against these criteria and the institution's specific goals, is essential for making informed and ethical decisions. Question 18. Which approach would be most appropriate for the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's admissions committee when evaluating an applicant whose overall academic record is strong, but who has a significant deficiency in a foundational science course directly relevant to their chosen engineering specialization? Option A. Admission of the applicant without any specific plan to address the foundational science deficiency, assuming they will catch up once enrolled in the program. Option B. A holistic review that considers the applicant's overall academic profile, extracurricular achievements, and any demonstrated efforts to improve in the identified weak area, potentially leading to conditional admission with a remediation plan. Option C. Strict adherence to a minimum GPA requirement, automatically disqualifying the applicant if the deficiency in the foundational science course significantly impacts their overall GPA. Option D. Immediate rejection of the applicant due to the critical nature of the foundational science course for the chosen engineering specialization, regardless of other academic strengths. The correct answer is B. A holistic review that considers the applicant's overall academic profile, extracurricular achievements, and any demonstrated efforts to improve in the identified weak area, potentially leading to conditional admission with a remediation plan. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the applicant's academic record, while strong in some areas, shows a significant gap in a core subject area crucial for the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's engineering programs. The admissions committee must balance the desire to admit promising students with the need to ensure they have the foundational knowledge to succeed. A careful judgment is required to determine if the applicant's strengths outweigh this deficiency, and if there are mechanisms to address it. The correct approach involves a holistic review that considers the applicant's overall academic profile, extracurricular achievements, and any mitigating circumstances or demonstrated interest in improving in the identified weak area. This approach aligns with the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's stated commitment to fostering diverse talent and providing opportunities for growth. It recognizes that a single grade or subject area may not fully represent a student's potential and allows for a more nuanced evaluation. Ethically, this approach promotes fairness and equity by not rigidly excluding candidates based on a single data point, while still upholding academic standards. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the GPA without considering other factors would be overly simplistic and potentially discriminatory. It fails to acknowledge that a student's performance can be influenced by various factors, and it ignores the possibility of future academic success. This approach would violate the spirit of a comprehensive admissions process. Another incorrect approach that immediately disqualifies the applicant based on the single subject deficiency, without exploring potential remediation or the applicant's demonstrated passion for engineering, would be too rigid. This fails to consider the applicant's potential to learn and adapt, and it misses the opportunity to identify students who, with appropriate support, could become valuable members of the institute. This approach is not aligned with fostering a dynamic and inclusive academic community. A further incorrect approach that might involve admitting the student without any plan to address the identified weakness would be irresponsible. While it might seem accommodating, it sets the student up for potential failure and does not serve the best interests of either the student or the institute. This approach neglects the professional responsibility to ensure students are adequately prepared for the rigor of the program. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Clearly identifying the core competencies and foundational knowledge required for the program. 2. Evaluating the applicant's profile against these requirements, looking for both strengths and weaknesses. 3. Considering any evidence of effort to overcome weaknesses or exceptional performance in other relevant areas. 4. Exploring potential support mechanisms or conditional admissions if a significant but addressable weakness is identified. 5. Making a decision that balances academic rigor with the institute's mission and values, ensuring fairness and promoting student success. Question 19. Implementation of a new online application portal at the Agua Prieta Technological Institute has led to a surge in applicant inquiries regarding specific program requirements and admission deadlines. A junior administrative assistant, tasked with responding to these inquiries, receives a question about a recently updated scholarship deadline that differs from the information previously published on the institute's website. The assistant is unsure which deadline is the most current and accurate. Option A. Inform the applicant that the information is uncertain and advise them to check the website periodically for updates without attempting to find the definitive answer. Option B. Provide the applicant with the deadline that was previously published on the website, assuming it is still the correct one unless explicitly told otherwise. Option C. Verify the scholarship deadline by cross-referencing with the official admissions office and consulting the most recent internal communication regarding scholarship updates before providing an answer to the applicant. Option D. Share the deadline mentioned in a recent informal email from a senior faculty member, as they are likely to have the most up-to-date information. The correct answer is C. Verify the scholarship deadline by cross-referencing with the official admissions office and consulting the most recent internal communication regarding scholarship updates before providing an answer to the applicant. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need for accurate information and the ethical obligation to maintain data integrity and adhere to established institutional protocols. The pressure to provide timely responses must be balanced against the risk of disseminating unverified or incomplete data, which could lead to misinformed decisions by applicants and potentially damage the institute's reputation. Careful judgment is required to navigate this tension. The correct approach involves a systematic verification process before releasing any information. This means consulting official admission guidelines, cross-referencing data with the admissions office, and ensuring all information is current and officially sanctioned. This aligns with the ethical principles of accuracy and transparency expected within an educational institution. Specifically, it upholds the implicit agreement with prospective students that information provided by the institute is reliable and authoritative. Adhering to established protocols for information dissemination prevents the spread of misinformation and ensures that all applicants receive consistent and correct guidance, thereby promoting fairness and equity in the admissions process. An incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or unofficial sources fails to meet the standard of accuracy. This can lead to applicants making critical decisions based on flawed information, such as incorrect application deadlines or eligibility criteria, which could result in their disqualification. This breaches the ethical duty of care owed to prospective students. Another incorrect approach that involves guessing or providing speculative answers, even with good intentions, is equally problematic. This undermines the credibility of the institute and can create false expectations. It demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for the importance of factual accuracy in official communications. A further incorrect approach that involves deferring all questions without attempting to find verified answers, while seemingly safe, can be perceived as unhelpful and inefficient. While verification is crucial, a complete lack of engagement can frustrate applicants and reflect poorly on the institute's responsiveness. The professional decision-making process should involve a commitment to finding accurate information, even if it requires a slight delay, and communicating the verification process to the applicant to manage expectations. Professionals should prioritize accuracy, adhere to institutional policies, and maintain open and honest communication with stakeholders. Question 20. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential need to share applicant data with an external auditing body investigating the fairness of the admissions process at the Agua Prieta Technological Institute. The auditing body has submitted a formal request for anonymized statistical data on applicant demographics and performance metrics from the previous admission cycle. However, the request also includes a secondary, less specific query about the general academic profile of candidates who were interviewed but not admitted, without providing specific identifiers. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for the Agua Prieta Technological Institute in responding to this request? Option A. Refuse to provide any data, stating that the Institute's policies strictly prohibit the sharing of any applicant information with external parties, regardless of the request's nature. Option B. Immediately provide all requested data, including any identifiable information that might help the auditors understand the secondary query, to ensure full cooperation. Option C. Provide the anonymized statistical data as requested, and politely decline the secondary query regarding interviewed but not admitted candidates, citing privacy concerns and the lack of specific identifiers for a meaningful, non-identifiable response. Option D. Attempt to compile a general overview of the interviewed, but not admitted candidates by cross-referencing internal notes and interview feedback, and then provide this alongside the anonymized statistical data. Correct answer is C. Provide the anonymized statistical data as requested, and politely decline the secondary query regarding interviewed but not admitted candidates, citing privacy concerns and the lack of specific identifiers for a meaningful, non-identifiable response. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect applicant privacy and ensure fairness in the admissions process. The Agua Prieta Technological Institute, like any educational institution, operates under specific guidelines for data handling and admissions, which are paramount to maintaining trust and integrity. Careful judgment is required to avoid both the premature disclosure of sensitive information and the obstruction of a legitimate inquiry. The correct approach involves a structured and transparent process that adheres strictly to the Agua Prieta Technological Institute's established admissions policies and data privacy regulations. This approach prioritizes verifying the legitimacy of the request, seeking consent where applicable, and providing only the information that is permissible and relevant to the inquiry, without compromising the privacy of other applicants. This aligns with the ethical imperative to treat all applicants fairly and with respect for their personal data, as well as any specific regulations governing educational institutions in Mexico that the Institute must follow. An incorrect approach that involves immediately providing the requested information without verification or consent fails to uphold data privacy principles and could violate institutional policies. This could lead to accusations of favoritism or unfair disclosure, undermining the integrity of the admissions process. Another incorrect approach, which is to completely refuse to engage with the inquiry, even if it is legitimate and from an authorized source, could be seen as uncooperative and potentially hinder necessary oversight or investigation, depending on the nature of the request. A third incorrect approach, which is to attempt to infer or guess information to satisfy the request, is highly unprofessional and unethical, as it relies on speculation rather than verified facts and could lead to significant errors and misrepresentations. Professionals in admissions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the nature and source of the request. They should then consult relevant institutional policies and any applicable legal or regulatory frameworks governing data privacy and admissions. If the request appears legitimate but requires sensitive information, the next step is to seek appropriate authorization or consent. If the request is unclear or potentially problematic, seeking guidance from supervisors or legal counsel within the institution is crucial. The ultimate goal is to respond accurately, ethically, and in compliance with all governing rules.